Hello everyone and welcome back to day 2 of the Insider Series event on OTT Looking Forwards. We had an excellent day 1 of content with the likes of the NFL, La Liga, Astro and more. My name is Will Tubbs and I'm the head of event content here at SportsPro and I'll be your host again today. To start with, just to familiarise anyone who hasn't joined us before, you can see you've already in the chat, just put your location and where you're from. You can see people coming in from yesterday all over the world, from the likes of Malaysia, from Kenya, from the States, and across Europe as well. So please put your location there and kind of get chatting with each other. So I'm going to do a quick poll. I think I did a few polls yesterday. So this one's kind of all about where you see the highest growth of these OTT platforms. So which of the following OTT platforms do you project having the highest 2021 growth? You've got Netflix, HBO Max, Prime, Peacock, NBC, Roku, Disney Plus, and ABBA. So put your choice down there. Thank you very much. I'll come back to that in a second. But yeah, let's take a quick look through today's agenda. So yesterday we kind of more focused on the kind of commercial, strategic side of OTT. Today's definitely more of a tech focus to it, which I'm really looking forward to. So we'll be kicking off with a broadcast tech panel working at the new viewing experience with Warner Media, Flow Sports, and Zixi. On second, we have another tech-focused session that's this time looking at artificial intelligence, remote production, and technology's future role in sports broadcast with the likes of Pixellot, the FA, and CONCACAF. And finally, we hear all about strategies, innovations, and converting subscribers in the new OTT, where we've got UFC Fight Pass tuning in from the west coast of the States, or from Vegas, DTM, motorsports content owner, and Ingenico as well. Now, before our first session, some quick housekeeping for you all. We recommend using the latest version of Chrome for the best viewing experience. You see in the chat and the polls tab already. As you can see already, Disney Plus is way ahead at the moment. Please keep your phones on. A few of you have voted so far. For any questions you'd like to be presented to the panelists, please ensure you use that tab there, and Sid will be your best person to answer that to esteemed panelists. Also, questions feature a Facebook feature allowing you to upvote questions you like, so use that there. If you see something you like to answer, give it a vote to ensure it moves to the top. You can also use that tab for any problems you're having, and someone from SportsPro will offer help. If at any point you get disconnected, please contact us at support@sportspromedia.com. Also, top of your screen, just to the left of the chat tab, you'll see a bell icon. To mute notifications, simply press that bell to avoid any distractions. Also, a popular question that comes up, I confirm that all sessions are being recorded and you can access on the Insider Series website under the On-Demand tab. I believe you can see all of yesterday's one already, so feel free to download those if you missed any of yesterday's content. So you can follow the conversation, have your say on social using the hashtag SPInsider and with our Twitter handle at SP_influencers. Our Twitter handle will also keep you up to date with all upcoming events and speaker announcements. While I've attempted to have your attention, I want to point out some of our upcoming events. We'll be returning for a one-day focus on finance investments, where we've got already some great letter speakers confirmed from the likes of Sam Porter, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for DC United and Head of Legal at Swansea, Liam Scully, who I believe is the youngest Chief Executive of a football club in the UK from Lincoln City. We've got Laurie Pinto from Blackstar Capital, and also Daniel Gee from Sheridan, and there'll be more to be announced in the coming days. So do sign up for that one if you haven't done already. And that will be followed by our Athletes in Business, which will take place at the end of September. And then we've got a leadership one as well. But in between finance and investment and Athletes in Business, we have UNOT's SportsPro Live, where we'll have a quick video to showcase what's happening there. Great, and then as I said, there's new speakers being added every day. Just yesterday, I've confirmed the Global F1 Sponsorship Manager from Heineken, and she'll be joining other rights holders and broadcasts such as Wimbledon, Barcelona, the Carolina Panthers, the NBA, and so forth. So do not miss that. It's free to attend, so please go to sportsforlife.com to do that one there. And also we've got Asia coming up in October, and stay tuned for that. We've got some great content going for there. So yeah, I want to thank you, our sponsors as well, Verimatrix, our platinum partner, and of course Dixie, our gold partner, who is involved in this session here. Without their support, we won't be able to present these sessions to you. Very quickly, let's refer back to my poll. So in the lead, well, earlier it was Disney Plus with winning, but now it's Amazon Prime. Not sure if you saw our MD Nick's insights into where he sees the future of kind of Amazon in this role in the sports business. It's definitely worth a read, that one there. But I have to agree. I think Amazon will see the highest growth there. Interestingly, no one has put Netflix. In fact, it's on 0%. Cool. All right then. So let's go to the next session, the first session of the day. Without further ado, please welcome your moderator, Sid Coley, and his esteemed panelists from Warner Media, Zixi, and Flow Sports. Enjoy.
Thanks very much indeed, Will. Good afternoon and welcome along to the first session of the OTT and broadcast panels today. My name is Sid Coley. I'm a TV sports presenter and producer, and I'll be moderating this particular panel where we will be discussing the future of broadcast technology as well as the user experience. Now, if you've been keeping across the sphere, the perennial subjects of AR and VR, and the rest of it is a bit of a numbers game with 4K, 5G, Wi-Fi 6, and 8K, all vying for attention and making promises of unmatched innovation. If you are a consumer, on the other hand, your experience may have been augmented by watch parties, by social viewing, by live chats and polls, as well as a move towards what is widely regarded as the Twitchification of sport. But which of these technologies will truly be game changers? Which innovations fast-tracked during the pandemic will stick? And will traditional broadcasters shift mentalities in the midst of changing consumer habits and pivot their approach in a highly fragmented market? Well, these are some of the questions we'll be looking to answer in the company of what is undoubtedly a stellar panel. Joining us today, we have Peter Scott, VP Emerging Media and Innovation at Warner Media. Hello, Pete. Good to see you.
Hey, everybody from Atlanta, Georgia. How's everybody doing?
Fantastic. Pete, we're going to talk about the NBA briefly at the moment. Well, the NBA on TNT is a bit of an institution in sport broadcasting, debuting all the way back in 1989, which incidentally is the same year you joined the organization. So straight off the bat, I'm going to put you on the spot. From what you've seen thus far in a stop-start season, which teams do you think will make the NBA Finals?
You know, my gut says the LA Clippers. I just think the depth on that team is so solid. They're also really, really scrappy. And Kawhi Leonard is just an amazing player, and Doc is a great coach. So I think they're on the West, and I think on the East it's sort of a jump ball, so to speak. Excuse the example, but the Raptors are kind of this team that no one is sort of counting. I think they're really scrappy, and I think they could potentially be in the finals as well. So those are my two picks.
Indeed, defending champions, the Raptors under Nick Nurse. But let's take it a step further, Pete. If you had to place a bet on the champions, if you were a betting man, who's the smart?
The smartest bet's probably going to be the Clippers. I just think they're just a tough, scrappy team. And Doc is a great coach. I just think that's where I would put my money for sure.
Well, can't argue with that, Pete, and plenty more on sports betting in just a little bit, we promise. Next, we have Justin Hoyman, Product Director at Flow Sports. Justin previously was at CBS Sports, and in an earlier career, actually played professional baseball for the Cleveland Indians. Fresh off a relaunch. Justin, what can you tell us about the Flow Sports rebrand?
Hey, Sid, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, the rebrand has been, I think two pieces of it are really important. It, kind of creates this cohesive brand amongst a variety of different sports that we cover. And the other part of it is, I think focus internally for us. Our mission is we fight for our sports, and we're delivering live events and exclusive content that unite communities. And I think, having that kind of supreme focus is really having an impact on the types of things that we're working on that we know are moving the business and how we got here.
Thanks, Justin. Now, Justin is in Texas. I am in London. Pete is in Atlanta. but clearly knocking us all off our perch and rounding off this panel is Eric Bolton, Vice President Business Development at Zixi. Eric has held various executive sales and marketing positions across markets, including Australia, Asia, South America, Europe, and the US. So in true globe-trotting style, Eric, where in the world are you at the moment and what's it like?
Hello, Sid. Greetings live from Patagonia down in southern Chile. So down here in the end of winter, hoping that the rain lets up, but very happy to be here and join this fine panel.
Fantastic stuff. So a bit of housekeeping before we start. Do say hello if you spot someone in the People tab and get involved in the chat section. But if you do have any questions for our panelists, I'm sure there'll be plenty, please use the questions tab and you can upvote the questions you would most like to see our panelists answer. We'll also have a couple of audience polls, the first of which should be on your screens now. And the question is, which innovation in sport broadcasting will most impact the user experience? And your options are AR or VR, AI or machine learning, 5G, 4K or 8K, and finally, innovations in cloud and edge. Please do participate in that poll, and we will reveal the results a little later on. So that's all for now. Let's jump straight into the panel discussion. Pete, we'll start with you. How do you see the user experience evolving on OTT, and what innovations in technology at the moment excite you the most?
I think for us, it's what you said earlier about the Twitch implications. The idea of the changing of how people watch content has evolved so tremendously. That interactive agent of engaging with a sports fan, whether it be during the entire game, short moments, et cetera, I think are things that everybody is looking at. I think, Flow, ourselves, even on the entertainment sports side, how can you engage the consumer while they're watching? The attention span is shorter. So we're looking at ways to create multiple versions of one game. We talked about that a couple of days ago, where we feel there'll be maybe one feed for a younger generation, one feed for betting, one feed for maybe a comic or a different perspective, and then the traditional broadcast. And I think we're experimenting with that, and technology has enabled us to do that very inexpensively. We've just done some stuff with the NBA called NBA Bet Stream, where we brought in betting experts to watch a game with you to make that kind of interesting. We're seeing good results there, where we're going after little niche audiences. So I think the key is for us is continue to explore, ride the trend that we're seeing throughout the consumption of video content, and make sure that we're tracking all the user data. We again talked about that yesterday. You can have the greatest content, you can have the greatest interactivity, but if you're not collecting the attributes of your users as they're participating with those entities, you're really missing out, because you want to use that data as a long-term value for the future. So those are kind of the touch points we're looking at right now.
Indeed, and Justin, coming over to you, Flow Sports struck a partnership with LiveLike for social viewing and watch parties. What is your view on the interaction?
Yeah, we have really similar views. It's really interesting to hear. I think what we've seen and what we're hoping to achieve, and I mentioned earlier about our mission being igniting communities, and this plays really well into what we're doing, and going really deep into live events and being able to provide perspective that fans for our sports couldn't find anywhere else. And that's kind of our unique proposition. We believe we can connect people to the events. You think about, having the fans at the event and the impact they can make, but also their connection to the event itself. And, we're thinking about how do we recreate that digitally such that fans feel like they're there. Our tagline is "Be there." We want to help fans be there. And so we really feel like the watch parties examples kind of create this additional dimension to the live stream that allows them to kind of be in touch with it and even be part of that live event. We've done a couple different executions with gamification where we allow people to make picks. But we've also done some things with influencer chats where you find two of the best jiu-jitsu fighters in the world and they're watching with you live, and you're able to kind of interact with them directly and see it through their lens. It's a whole unique perspective that fans hadn't seen before, and it's been really fun to kind of see it start to play out.
Indeed, Justin and Pete, earlier this week, there was an announcement that both Turner Sports as well as the NBA had also struck a partnership with LiveLike for private chat rooms during the NBA playoff. Is there anything you can tell us about that partnership and what you expect from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's just an evolution of looking at really good vendors that can supply solutions for us. Easy to plug in, easy to start. And we were initially going to use them for March Madness, but unfortunately we had to cancel. So we're kind of excited to see, how it engages the user, where they're setting up these small sort of rooms that people can come together and create their own experiences. I think we're going to see that. I think you're going to, again, in that versioning idea, you're going to see tribes of fans getting together in their own rooms, watching and participating and, enjoying the event. So we're excited. I think, again, it's just to be able to test and see where these types of interactive features can help us.
Thanks for that, Pete. Eric, I'd like to come to you. And could you possibly set the scene for us from a tech perspective? I mean, 4K and 5G keep coming up when it comes to conversations about the user experience. But how do you feel these technologies will impact streaming and the experience for the end user?
Well, I think it's a great question. And, I'm listening to Peter's point about the evolution of the broadcast experience. It's definitely going to be technology driven. And the quality of experience that the consumer sees is subject to the quality of service and the infrastructure that we, the vendor industry, can provide. So we've been watching, and I've seen that in live sports, clearly one of the biggest drivers in innovation and in audiences, but the pandemic putting us back a bit. Now I think you're seeing engagement in an entirely different way, both from an audience perspective and a productions perspective, with everybody having to work remotely overnight. I mean, those plans have been there, but we all had to adopt them very quickly. In the new world order, you're not on fixed infrastructures and truck. You're going to be migrating to clouds and virtual production. So that means that technologies like 4K, 8K, 12K are going to become available in a much more rapid fashion. I mean, we launched the first 4K UHD channel for a global financial news network and are now getting ready to do that within the sports context and have that, say, NHL during the playoffs right now, and allowing partners to get delivery through third party in the cloud. We are actually going into full tests on the 5G. We think 5G is going to be very impactful on its ability to acquire content and deliver content. And we'll be doing tests, in the 8K range, where you could have 8K 60 frames and literally feel like you're at the sporting event and sitting in center stage.
Cheers for that, Eric. Now, Pete, I'd like to come back to you for a quick follow-up. Now, 5G, of course, forms a core of the AT&T business, and it's really at the heart of what the organization is doing at the moment. What are your views on 5G moving forward, and also artificial intelligence?
For us, I mean, since, I've been at Turner for a long time now, Warner Media now part of the AT&T family. And what's just sort of awesome in that relationship is you get exposed to all these new technologies, and one of those being 5G. And I don't know if anybody was able to watch, but we did some live low latency streaming with Shaquille O'Neal during the NBA All-Star game, where we had him with a camera during the dunk contest. And we had millimeter wave on site at the United Center, edge compute, and we're able to send those signals directly back to the truck. And I think that's just just the beginning. I think 5G is going to enable, I think Eric's 100% right, moving video faster and quicker over lines that will allow, experiences that quite frankly, none of us ever thought was possible. So I think it's going to be a crawl, walk, run. Ultimately, you're going to have to create products that users are going to want to buy a 5G enabled phone, sign up for those packages, and there'll be a combination of all of us to sort of figure out what is that value exchange we're giving back to the user that they're going to want to sign up for 5G. We're exploring some pretty cool options with the NBA, as AT&T is a strategic partner with the NBA. So, I just see it growing. I think we're going to have to do a really good job of just creating a value exchange for the consumer, not just in the States, but I think around the world, to make 5G valuable and where users want to go ahead and purchase it.
Thanks, Pete. In terms of AI, do you have any views on how that may impact the user experience in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, we're already using AI in multiple fronts. WSC Sports, one of our favorite vendors, we're automating the clipping of highlights every night for the NBA using a combination of AI. And I just think it's just going to happen more and more and more. I think the ability for us to take large loads of data, to examine it quickly and make decisions, and then target, hyper personalization, leveraging AI, I think that's really going to be where all of us are going to be conscious of that. And then I'll finish where I really believe that 5G will basically, in a lot of different ways, be more effective, quite possibly in the AI space, because it will create low latency decision making. And those software companies that can embrace 5G and really use that as an opportunity to move data very quickly and to make decisions, I think that's a nice combination. 5G, AI, and then potentially the content that we can get directly personalized to users.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pete. Eric, now in the past, you've been fairly candid about AI being liberally used to market everything from toasters to jet engines, which I found fantastic. How do you actually think AI can have practical implications on the QoE for the end user?
Well, I think Peter started talking into it, and we definitely enjoy our partnership with WSC Sports and just the ability to have object recognition driven by AI as an example. But I think that the consumer is expecting a far more curated edge, the spottification of how content will be provided. Live has very unique challenges. This is not a file-based world. It's happening, and as we've been seeing in the low latency environment, not a lot of tolerance for error. So where live television was always difficult, live digital gets in many ways exponentially difficult. And that's going to require machine learning, things that will be able to know whether a signal feed and an encoder was performing well. Was there an audio video impact? We've moved very quickly in 5 years from where a web digital experience was okay if it was macro blocking or maybe chunky and buffering, to now the expectation from the audience is it's actually superior to legacy and traditional television. I think that the infrastructure is going to be moving not just to virtual, but beyond static to self-healing, regulating, and with a lot of interaction between things you wouldn't think that servers and clouds were as important, but they become critical to the broadcast, and then they enable the machines to all interconnect. And I think you're going to see over time, in a shorter time than we probably predicted, an AI ecosystem where you have infrastructure, you have live editing, your promo to television is no longer going to the living room, it goes to social media, and all of this is to drive consumer engagement. And as Peter was describing, can I get deeper looks inside the players, the behind the scenes, the court? How can I really expand that fan experience? Well, there are going to need to be engines that can direct and understand what content is appropriate to that viewer. And that implies you're going to need an intelligent infrastructure to support all of that in both acquisition and distribution.
Well, thank you, Eric. Justin, I'd like to come to you and talk about something that's specifically from the UX and UI side of things. Now, you, of course, oversee both the development as well as the strategy for the app at Flow Sports. Do you think it's fair to say that sport can learn a lot from entertainment, perhaps gaming, things like Netflix and Spotify, in terms of personalization on the UI and UX end?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. If there's anything that I've learned at Flow Sports, it's a great big world out there, and people have, can have very niche needs and have very specific fandom, and we're constantly working towards how do we drill into the thing that customers are looking to watch next. And even within a sport of itself, you can have these little pockets of interest, and it's been really interesting to kind of uncover those and figure it out. And I think the Spotify's and the Netflix of the world are creating a new standard, and it's up to everyone else to either keep up or get passed by.
Indeed. Now, you've been introducing, polls and chats, fan noise, digital cheers, plenty of other really exciting features. What kind of innovations are you looking to implement at the moment from a personalization perspective, or which ones have you already implemented that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of research in the experiments that we've been running right now with the watch parties, and talking to our customers, surveying them, and really getting an understanding of if what we're doing right now isn't the thing that really resonates, what are some of the next things that we could do to help optimize and personalize it and make it better? And there's a few things that really stood out. So the first is the ability to spin up a private watch party and just kind of keep it, with friends or specific people that you're interested in watching together with, that kind of create that, maybe a smaller version of your community or something you're really comfortable with. And then we've also seen some smoke around making picks. And so we feel like if we give fans the opportunity to compete against one another and they're sort of seeing themselves as part of this community or ranking up or giving them a reason to come back the next time around and compete against the folks in that community, you kind of create this dynamic experience that we may drive some retention and get fans to kind of really feel immersed in it. And then, maybe this is a bit of a stretch in terms of personalization, but, I talked earlier about connecting fans to the event and how do we make them be part of it? And we want them to have, to be super engaged with that. And we feel like if we were to bring in influencers to the watch party and actually connect those folks with the influencers, it's a more personal experience in the actual event itself, as if they've become part of it, as if they've enhanced it just by being there and being, involved and brought into it. And so those are a few things that we're looking at next. We're excited about.
Cool, good stuff, Justin. Now, at this stage, I'd like to take a question from the audience, and this one's been upvoted the most. The question comes in from Nima, and she asks, do you see a future for a dynamic community Twitch-like environment in a typical OTT product, whether a sport OTT broadcaster or rights holders own OTT products? So that's the question. Pete, do you want to have a crack at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's so amazing about Twitch, we work closely with them on our E-League partnership and just learn so much from that audience. And I think what they're doing is they're pushing all of us to set an expectation of where the viewer experience will be. So I think, we have teams that are looking at some of the integrations they're doing. We work closely with Twitch on multiple fronts. So I think it's a great question. I think I would instruct everybody, if you want to see where sort of the innovation is happening around live content, it's really happening there, and assign people to sort of understand what that flow is. Because again, going back to the versioning, I think we're all going to be in this world. And again, thanks to Flow and the guys with great technology that, Eric and his team provide, it just allows us to do things that we could never do before. And I think you're going to see this happening over and over and over, us experimenting, looking at things where there is interactivity between the users. So, just a big fan of where we think this is going, and we're just going to keep exploring and looking at these opportunities. Obviously in the States, and we'll talk about this probably later, with betting going on, that's such an easy sort of engagement tool, and converting casual sports fans into casual bettors to create that engagement, I think will be one thing that we're particularly focusing on at Turner.
Indeed, great stuff, Pete. Speaking of sports betting, now that's something I wanted to speak to you about specifically. A brief history of sports betting in America. So May 2018, the US Supreme Court strikes down the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, effectively lifting the federal ban on sports betting, which was in place since 1992. So aside from Nevada, it pretty much didn't exist in the truest sense of the word. Of course, since 2018, it certainly has picked up. So there's an argument to be made here that the European market in terms of sports betting is a lot more mature as compared to the American market. But how are you looking to kind of introduce optimizations and innovations to capture that audience, which might actually be a new set of people just about getting into sports betting going forward?
Yeah, again, it goes back to that versioning, right? So we're already testing that out with NBA BetStream, where we're basically encouraging, educating, getting Americans to understand what sports betting is. I think we still have to make it a lot easier for Americans to understand. Super Bowl betting in the States is super popular, making those simple types of bets and then slowly bringing them in to the more complicated bets is where we want to be as stewards to kind of help people walk into that space. You're already seeing a ton of money from our friends at FanDuel and DraftKings. It's almost like Groundhog Day, where you're seeing a lot more advertising, a lot more dollars coming into the marketplace. The cost of acquisition for them is so important. And so the beauty of being a rights holder, you can sort of help get people into that space and figure out where that engagement, where that value exchange, again, that's a big sort of part of what we do, that value exchange back to the consumer. And Justin has said that, I'm super impressed with Flow Sports and how they've gone to niches and created a pretty amazing business, that's a value exchange. Eric does it on the technology front as well, where people behind the scenes are doing things to create that experience that is a value exchange for that user. So again, we think we just have to be able to evolve, be nimble, be quick, and try to basically serve as many different fandoms as we can.
Brilliant, fantastic. Thanks, Pete. At this point, I'm going to take yet another question from the audience. This one comes in from Navedia. The question is, the engagement of young users aged 18 to 21 is critical, but the key audience is the one that's paying right now. So how does technology transformation help a smooth transition from those who aren't quite as adept as millennials or Generation Alpha? Do you want to have a crack at that, Justin?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's a good question. We definitely pay close attention to the different demographics. I think right now we're really well suited to the folks that are paying us a subscription fee. We're a subscription business, and therefore that's something that we need to be able to master. And it's important to be be on the platforms and meet customers where they're currently at, as well as have the foresight to do the research and understand where are the Gen Zers going to be, which devices are they going to consume. How are we going to be? How are we going to modify the product and start understanding how that generation is connecting maybe their friends, and how are they connecting folks to the apps that they're using? And so I think we're just starting to kind of get into some of those pieces with the watch parties, and there's obviously a lot more research that needs to be done so that we're prepared to kind of move in and be ready for that next generation of folks that are ready and have the the income to spend on a subscription service to stream their passion.
Indeed. Thank you, Justin. Eric, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's very interesting as you talk about the migration to all these different new streaming services, and how you have a very large scale tectonic plate with traditional television moving to now a cord cut OTT digital space. Certainly UI navigation becomes critical. Amazon Video has been a big partner of ours for a long time, and have obviously entered pretty heavily into the sports leagues and Premier League and things of that nature. NBC's launch on Peacock, and all of their sports partnerships. And how do you combine that with a traditional audience who may have levels of ability to navigate in a natively digital one? And I think that kind of goes to what Peter was talking about with Twitch. You have a variety of audiences. So if you're going to be watching a tier 1 sporting event that has betting tied to it, I need to think about different levels of quality of service, production value, synchronicity, low latency, all of those pieces that are behind the scenes critical to ensure that happens. And at the same time, you get to Twitch, they may have 80 to 100,000 channels at any given moment, but out of that 50 to 60,000 are audiences of 10. Now that's not a bad thing. It's just the way the world comes together. I think the bigger thing for us as an industry is how does a common set of tools, a common set of infrastructure support that range of experiences in that range of monetization? Because at the top tier of Twitch, there are millions and millions of dollars. And certainly in a Super Bowl, there are millions and millions of dollars. But all of that has to come from a unified approach in an that is going through its own very, very disruptive transformation to itself.
Mm-hmm.
Sid, the only thing I would just share with that is that, listen, it's our job, Justin, myself, to create products that are easy for people to use, whether it's one generation or another. And I think the good news is that we have content that people want. So be stewards appropriately and help people engage with that content and do it in the right way that's easy for them to do that. We had a discussion the other day. I can get into an Uber and have a long conversation with the driver about streaming video. Well, think about that for just a second. No one knew what streaming video was 4 or 5 years ago. It wasn't even part of the nomenclature, but now everybody talks about it, knows about it. And I think it's a combination of Netflix's amazing ability to make it easy to use technology to engage. And I think that's what we as product and as stewards of content need to always remember. So it's a great question to not forget the multi-generational fandom that engages with our content.
Indeed. Thanks for that, Pete, and thank you, Eric. And thanks for your question, Navedia. We'll take a couple more questions from the audience. I believe this next one is definitely for yourself, Pete. And this one comes in from Delal. The question is, What are your plans for leveraging hyper-personalization to gain greater revenues from targeted advertising?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we have evolved, I think the technology is accelerating. I think COVID has changed, has done more for innovation than any CTO or CEO could ever have done in the last 5 years. It just accelerated it. And I think that's a bold statement, but I think it's a true statement. No one knew what Zoom was, even 8 months ago. So I think the ability to set that expectation is important. But just as we're concentrating on creating great technology, I really, really feel that all of us have to basically be more conscious to the consumer and build teams that understand that. The Facebooks, the Netflix of the world, that's their DNA. They collect data, they understand their consumer, they leverage the attributes that come with the connection to that IP. And I would say that's what's going to drive more relevancy for all of our businesses. Build teams, build muscles inside companies that take data just as important as transmitting a signal around the world. Because I think ultimately you can have all these great channels, all these great opportunities. And I think Flow is another great example of finding a niche audience and capitalizing on that niche audience. If I were to say an investment or to really be focusing on is understanding the user data and really collecting that, telling the story around it, democratizing the information so that you can create this hyper personalization that the question is asking, and how we can pair a advertiser with a basic segment audience that we know will convert. So that's what, again, changing a company like ours, it was primarily a wholesale company for so many years, and getting them to think more direct to consumer. And our new CEO, Jason Kohler, is doing that on the Warner Media side. I think that's what I would encourage everybody on this call to really embrace and to understand.
Great stuff. Thank you, Pete. We'll take one more question from the audience before moving ahead. This one comes in from Dave. And I believe, Justin, you've been active in this sphere. You might have interesting views about this particular question. So Dave asks, audio is so important to any type of entertainment. What are your thoughts on the 4 audio being used in most leagues, and specifically the audio used by the MLB, which at times perhaps ignores certain aspects of crowd noise?
Interestingly, we actually haven't done anything with the faux audio, but I'm interested to kind of see, we've taken the kind of wait and see approach with something like this. Certainly our partner LiveLike, one of the reasons that we chose them is the flexibility to kind of do a variety of different things. And this is one of the levers that can be pulled. But, I could, just to kind of touch on it as a fan, I've seen it and I've actually been impressed with the ability to kind of recreate what a live experience is and that energy that's kind of really been missing from live events. And so, honestly, I'm kind of just waiting to see how it goes. I don't know if anyone else has a little bit more experience on this.
Pete, Eric?
I was reading a good article this morning about Fox's decision to pump in audio into their games and MLS, and I think everybody was nervous it was going to be like a Seinfeld episode where this, sort of obscure audio would pop in. But I think it's interesting to see what's going on in this virtual audio, virtual fan. There's something that's going to come out of this, even after we can come back to stadiums, that you wonder if it will fill in the gaps of maybe crowds not being on site, maybe creating more a deeper personal relationship because people can be at home doing these interactive exchanges. It'll be interesting. I think we're experimenting. You're seeing the stuff we're doing with NBA and Microsoft meetings where all the fans are on the back. I mean, it's just amazing whether or not when we come back, what evolution of that will continue. I think what's also interesting about audio is, again, choosing your fandom. Who do you want to listen to? Could it be a comic? Could it be an influencer? Could it be someone other than maybe the great Marv Albert that we have on TNT? Is it someone else that people will be able to choose from the audio, or will they want to listen to more of the player mics or all those different sort of abilities? And again, technology allows us to create that personalization on the audio side. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how far filling in seats with virtual people, doing audio and sort of enhancing what's happening in the real world, whether that becomes acceptable like it is now, it'll be interesting to see how that nets out.
Yeah, I do think that's really interesting, and I think from our perspective, when you have these niche sports that we thrive in, a lot of our communities are kind of spread throughout the globe. They're connected through our service in many ways. It's not going to your there's maybe not a professional sports team in your big city nearby to go watch these events, and so even without COVID, we already sort of live in that world, and that's why that particular topic's interesting. Where if we see some success with COVID, on some other executions, perhaps where we go cover events that may not have large audiences, this becomes the kind of thing that can kind of help stitch together the energy that you get from the live events, hearing the fans and some of the elements that might otherwise be missing.
For sure. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Pete. At this stage, I would like to introduce the second audience poll of the day, which should be on your screens shortly. The question of the poll is, as a consumer of sport, what would you like to see more of? And your options are two-way interaction. We've discussed plenty of that on this panel. Lower latency, betting-focused streams, social viewing or watch parties, which is something Flow Sports have, of course, been engaged in. Enhanced picture quality, so that's 4K or 8K. And finally, behind-the-scenes content. So do participate in that poll, and we'll bring you the results shortly. Eric, I'd like to come to you now. Something that Pete said earlier was extremely interesting, to me at least, when he said no CXO, no CTO accelerated innovation the way COVID has. Presumably working with clients at the highest level, which includes some of the world's biggest broadcasters, how did Zixi go about introducing virtual workflows? And how have you also been working on lower latency?
Well, I think Pete said it very well. And, there had been many, many plans for years for virtualization and managing that. And the pandemic just became basically a black swan catalyst and took what would have happened in 3 to 5 years and then accelerated it into a matter of months. I think that the idea of how everyone's going to remotely produce everything, and it does it, and it impacts, as we were just talking about, everything from audio, video, the viewer experience, the way habits are forming around that. And from our perspective, the largest media companies were very well prepared. They went into action. You saw overnight, we had one major broadcaster who would have 6,500 people in a given building and are now operating on air with 30. You had to move live production from control rooms into the cloud, into a virtual control room overnight. You had to have directors, producers, graphic operators all working in concert. And the fact that everything has stayed on air goes to show you it can be done. And I think you're also watching that, sports has its own attributes, news has its own attributes, but at the end of the day, you're running a similar type of show. You're just kind of changing the production value and maybe the number of cameras. So I think that you need more flexibility to address a highly migrant audience. We just talked on things like how much personalization you're going to get. Audio may move from a crowd size to a very intimate size as you get to 4K and Atmos pieces. And I think that, as Peter also referenced, being able to take that data and understand how that translates into a desired viewing experience is going to be where the industry really leads. And I do think it's a stewardship and a curation, and moving from the one to many to ingest once, deliver to all is going to become very important for how we evolve. But I would just say it was really impressive as to how we moved overnight. Obviously IBC would be coming up traditionally. We had NAB, where our industry goes as a annual pilgrimage, and we went virtual on that overnight and actually had more folks attending than ever could have. We had certain meetings that were 100 of our main clients. I think that this is a new normal, and that's a way overused phrase, unfortunately, but we don't know what else to say to it. And it is changing viewer habits, it's changing work habits, and it's going to leave a very large impact in terms of how we go forward from here.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, Sid, even what we're doing today with Elsie, yourself, this is amazing what we're able to do, right? We're connecting one person from Texas, Atlanta, London, and Chile, and then we're also making it interesting for the fans. And so this is just going to be the expectation. I think it's 100% what Eric said. The muscle that everybody had to run into a studio bring people into a TV truck, fly people around the world. Well, those days are changed forever. We're using a company called Kisui that we've been doing a lot of remote broadcasts with, and that was unheard of. I couldn't convince a producer, director to even think consciously that that was an option. But because that lubrication has happened, and it's a combination, well, I don't have to get on a plane anymore. I could do this from my home and then take my kid to soccer practice after it's over. The dynamic of that is huge. And I think that is enabled by all the technology that's happening. But it's almost like we were for so long trying to get to the top of the hill to convince people. Now we're just sledding down it really, really fast, and it's just been lubricated. So I'm just really excited that people have now embraced it. We can do great things like this, where we can get participatory. Everybody enjoys the professionalism of this. But now I can't wait to see what's around the corner to make it even more easier for people to do these kind of things.
That's very well put, Pete, and a bit of future gazing in there as well. And I couldn't have possibly thought of a better way of closing this particular panel than that. I think just a few quick fire questions for you panelists before we round things up and before Will appears once again on the screens. And we are blessed to have an esteemed panel and some really stellar panelists today. So one bold prediction for the future from each of you, which could be sports tech, or could just widely be sports broadcasting, would be a great way, in my opinion, to cap things off. I know, Pete, you've got quite a few, so we will start with yourself.
So I'll just say one, and it's sort of been said a couple times. I think the evolution of sports rights are going to change to the point where I think video highlights will be more valuable than live rights. And I think all of us are going to have to figure out ways where we balance the ecosystem economically to make that work. And then how do we make highlights just as monetizable as 3-hour events? And then how do we basically make sure it's delivered to the right person on the right platform for his or her personalization? So that's what we're focusing on, working with great tech companies to sort of figure out where that goes and where we can create the value exchange and making sure that touch point. So when I am a Lakers fan, unfortunately, we're having a tough time right now, but I want to wake up in the morning and it be delivered directly to me. I don't want to have to go look for it. Those are the types of things that fandoms around the world, multiple leagues, whether it be all the way down to the youth level, all the way up to the professional level. I think video highlights and the ability to deliver that will just be ever evolving, but I think that'll be a primary shift in our business.
Brilliant. So video highlights, one certainly to keep an eye on going forward. Eric, how about yourself?
Well, I would take that and just continue on. I think, obviously we live in the business to business world. I think that when you do truly move to a software-defined, virtualized ability to create and acquire content, and now you're going to do something that you really hadn't thought about in expanding a network with technologies like 5G, and will just have, incredible throughputs, and it will allow you to create experiences like behind the scenes, individual player parts. You're going to need to create a plethora of content and product, and then you're going to need to find a way to get it there. And I think that what 5G is going to, in television, video is the business. And if the premise is video will become ubiquitous in our society as we see now and day to day, that is going to expand it in an axis that just hasn't been seen before. And from that, you're going in parallel with the AI machine learning. And I think it's just going to really set up curated experiences that are, Gen Z and below all expect. And I think that we, the industry, will be very busy creating all of that different level of product and ensuring that it's getting there. And it's going to be quite a learning curve for all of us.
Great stuff, Eric. And Justin, we will close off with yourself.
Something that I'm certainly not an expert on this, but something that I keep an eye on that I find really fascinating is blockchain technology, and thinking about, when I look through the lens of problems that I try to solve at my work, anywhere that there is the possibility of human error or something that can be solved with computers that we can automate is usually something that we pay close attention to. And I think about something from a macro perspective that could affect all kinds of industries, whether it be fixing voter fraud or fixing, even in the gambling industry in terms of betting and exchanging of money, obviously in the finance. That's something that I find really interesting. And I feel like in the years to come, that's going to disrupt a lot of different industries. So that's one that I find really fascinating.
Interesting stuff. Let's go back to the poll questions we asked the audience. The first question was, which innovation in sport broadcasting will impact the user experience the most? And it's actually neck and neck between AI or machine learning on one hand and 5G on the other. So that's really close. It'll be interesting to monitor how that goes. AR and VR is a close third with 26%. In the second question, we asked you, as a consumer of sport, what would you like to see more of? And 39% of you, almost the runaway lead here, say behind the scenes content is the way forward. Interesting stuff there. Well, thanks very much indeed to all our panelists today. Thank you all for what's been a great panel. I have to say, a huge amount of insight and a very high amount of engagement from the audience. Truly has been a pleasure to moderate, and we, of course, could have gone on a lot longer, but unfortunately, in the interest of time, we will have to leave it there. As we get close to wrapping up, I'd like to say a massive thank you once again to our panelists. Peter Scott, Vice President, Emerging Media and Innovation at Warner Media. Justin Hoyman, Product Director at Flow Sports. And finally, Eric Bolton, VP Business Development at Zixby. Thank you all for tuning in and being such an engaged audience. That's all from me. Hope to see you all soon. Have a lovely rest of the week. Will, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sid, and everyone else on the panel. Pete, I didn't hear you mention too much about the Warner Innovation Lab. I know that was a big kind of tie-up with the NBA, to kind of help co-manage the NBA digital portfolio. It'd be good to hear a little bit more from that.
Yeah, that's a great question. We paused on building that out. So for some of you who don't know, my colleague Jesse Redness is leading the Warner Media Innovation Lab on the High Line in New York. And the idea is, how do we take all the wonderful IP that we have at Warner Media, leverage it with 5G, AI, edge compute with our partner at AT&T, and really sort of test this stuff out. So we'll be opening it to the public. Obviously with COVID, we sort of had a pause for a little bit, but we'll be opening it this fall. So you'll get more information on that. And you're 100% right. How do we leverage that with our strategic partners like the NBA? And how do we sort of use it to make HBO Max better? All the different other content IPs that we have as well. Stay tuned for more information about the Warner Media Innovation Lab. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no worries. And we're looking forward to hearing more about that and covering it, of course, on Sportsbro Media. And also with the question, the poll I did at the beginning, with which OTT platform do you project seeing the highest growth rate for next year? Obviously, there might be a little bit of bias with HBO Max with Peter, but what do you guys think, Sage? Where do you see which platform do you see the highest growth for next year? From Netflix, HBO, Amazon, Peacock, Roku, Disney Plus.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's logical with Disney. I think Amazon is, the beauty of Amazon is, as they're selling toilet paper, they're also offering you a show. So they have multiple revenue streams to sort of offset what they can do. I think for us on the HBO Max side, I think you'll start to see more adoption and more consistency. So I think we still have really, really great content. If anybody saw Perry Mason over the last, I would encourage you to watch that, not because I'm an HBO Warner Media employee, but it's just really good content. So I think, I think this is pretty accurate from my eyes.
Sounds good. And any other guys, any kind of any platforms obviously you see with the highest growth rates for next year, or?
I agree. I mean, I think Disney's seems like an obvious choice. They're strategically positioned in, all the important spaces in terms of streaming, whether it be sports or the Hulu and the Disney Plus launch. I feel like they've kind of really created an opportunity to capture all different types of folks that are looking to move over to the OTT space. So.
I 100% agree. And it's interesting to see where we go with Amazon, obviously with Twitch as well, who are integrating more partnerships with rights holders you've seen with kind of Formula One recently. But yeah, all right then. Well, that's something that kind of without further ado. Thank you very much to Sid for moderating this, professional as ever, and to all our esteemed panelists from from Zixby, from Flow Sports and from Warner Media. Thank you very much for taking part to showcasing all those innovations in action. A reminder to everyone in the audience, if you sign up in advance, you'll be automatically redirected. If you've registered today, you can access the next session by clicking the link in your email for this upcoming session. The next session we'll hear all about, as you can see on the slide just popped up, all about AI, remote production, and other innovative tech, how it is shaping the future of sports broadcast. So that's not one to miss as well. So hopefully you see you all guys there. But for everyone here, thank you very much and see you shortly. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.